two, 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 two. The next session on the live stage will be Emily Endean at 2:30 in 5 minutes' time. That's 5 minutes' time on the live stage, Emily Endean. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Can you all hear me okay? Excellent. Well, firstly, thanks for coming along. It's probably been quite a long day, so hopefully everyone's had a good one. So I'm Emily. If anyone doesn't know who I am, I'm an outdoor photographer. I'm normally combining my love of nature with my personal work and my paid work, and I'm photographing the sea most of the time. So I'm a Fujifilm ex-photographer and brand ambassador, and I'm currently using the X-T5 and various lenses. So I've actually got the 16-80, 55-200, 60mm macro, but I've added in the 30mm macro, which is quite a new addition, and it's an amazing piece of kit, and I use that lens probably 90% of the time. So I'm also on the pro team for three-legged thing. So I've got my tripod, my L bracket, those kind of bits, and I'm also a partner of Case Filters. So I use filters for my landscape photography work, just for balancing the sky and the land and the polarizer and things like that. So today I'm going to be talking mainly about the past year of my life, I'd say. So around about a year ago, I decided to quit my day job in insurance. I hated it, it was soul destroying, and I was building my photography alongside, so I thought it was time. I was going to take the leap, and I quit my job, but at the same time, me and my partner, we decided to move into our van. So we left our house and our jobs at the same time. So looking back, I think, was I crazy? Very brave, and yeah, I just can't believe we did it. Everybody must have thought, what are they doing? But it meant that I could fully immerse myself in nature. I could take my photography on the road. I could go and photograph wherever I needed to be, and I could follow my work. So I love to use the camera as an extension of me. I specialise in landscape and seascapes, and I've been photographing that for probably around about 10 years now. So even as a small child, I had a little film camera, and I just loved photographing everything around me. My family, the New Forest. I'm from Bournemouth, so we were down the beach all the time. There's just so much beauty all around us, and I recognised that as a child and took out my little film camera. It was exciting sending a film off, but you always know that you're going to get one or two back that are actually in focus. Well, it was for me anyway. But since going full-time photography and navigating a new freelance world, I've managed to find that I've connected with some commercial work, some brands that I work with out in those environments that I love. So I feel like we've come together at a place and time where they can recognise what I do, and we can bring that together. So I'll show you some of that along the way as well. So I also photograph events, weddings, anything that I can find my way to navigate this new world. So I'll take you through my experiences from the last year. I'll show you some of the places we've travelled and the photographs that I've made along the way, and hopefully give you a bit of an insight into my life and how I'm navigating this freelance photography world. But before I go fully into that, I just wanted to explain a little bit about my approach to landscape photography. Everything I do has always been feelings driven. I don't have a great technical mind, so ever since I picked up a camera, and I just found that I loved photography. So everything that I'd learned along the way is just because I have a feeling within me, and I just want to photograph the things that I'm passionate about. And I think that hopefully comes through. So even like now, it's super nervous, you know, talking to everyone, but knowing that you're talking about something you're passionate about does make a huge difference. So there's always new things to learn, so I've got new perspectives. So I got an underwater housing for my camera so I could get out in the sea and photograph. I got a drone so that I could photograph from the sky. So I'm always chasing these new perspectives. And I love to chase great light, interesting conditions around the landscape. So if there's a storm, then I'm quite excited by that. If there's going to be rainbows after the rain, you know, it's all those kind of things that run through my head when I'm looking out for a good photograph. And I love to evoke emotion and tell a story, perhaps. So whether you can feel how I felt when I took that photo, or what that means to you, is always something different for everyone. So here we are. This is my new home. This is my classic Heimer. So it's a 1994 motorhome, so it's quite old. It's definitely had its quirks, and I think it's been a big learning curve just moving into a van full time. So just a sneak into the interior. We've really enjoyed making this our home, and people walk past and compliment our plants, and that's my wife's macrame hanging in the window as well. So we made it our home over the last year. So I live in my van with my wife and my dog Buster. So you'll see them in a couple of photos along the way. But firstly, like I mentioned, we lived in Bournemouth. So the first thing along the way, I wanted to show you some photographs from Dorset before we left the area and headed off on some adventures. So I'm normally found shooting either the seascape or the people within it. So quite often I'm found at the shoreline photographing the surfers. So it's these magical moments at sunrise and sunset when the light hits just right. And I really enjoy these kind of images that just look quite dreamy with the nice soft light. And it's the kind of light that you can't get in the middle of the day, so it has to be all about the early mornings or the late evenings. And then taking that out into the water, so like I say, I got the underwater housing. So this taught me to be very different in my approach, and you have to act a lot faster. So on the shoreline, you can be on your tripod and you can be set up waiting for a shot to happen, but out in the water, not only are you moving, the water's moving around you, your subject's moving. There's a lot happening here, so you have to be a bit quicker to try and get the action. And it helped me find new perspectives. So this particular pier in Bournemouth, I've photographed, I don't know, probably about 1,000 times over the last 10 years. And people always said to me, oh, don't you get a bit bored? And I was like, no, because every morning is different. Every sunrise is different. The tides are different. The weather's different. There's so many variables. And then adding this to the mix of being able to get out in the water. And I really enjoy trying to photograph so you can see I'm in the water, so you can really get a feel for that. And I remember this particular morning well. Like I say, I'm always looking for interesting conditions. This was taken at Chesil Beach by Portland. And it was a super calm morning. The wind wasn't moving. The water wasn't moving. And this fisherman was going about his business. And I got quite obsessive with these photographs. I probably had about 200 photographs of this fisherman out in his boat. So this is probably one of my favorites, just for the composition and the way the photograph's set up. And again, interesting conditions. So this was a Christchurch harbour, so this is quite close to where I used to live. And it's not very often that you get this nice mist across the water. So it literally looks like the boat is floating in mist. And this was during one of the a very frosty morning, actually. And just for some reason, there was just no movement in the air. And I think it was the mixture of the warm and cold. And, the water was just evaporating. And it just looked really, really eerie. So like I say, I'm always looking for these interesting conditions, and I think that can really make or break your photograph from standing out in the crowd and looking different. And I've got a couple of photographs here that were taken on the Jurassic Coast on a very, very foggy morning. And just to pick out these characters of the sheep in the mist, I just found it really fascinating. And again, just wandering around with my camera, not having a particular thought in mind, just looking out and seeking these compositions. And I find photography can be very mindful, and it's a nice escape from everything, and it's such a nice hobby or profession to have, because you'll all understand, you're all photographers. I think once you're in that moment, it's all consuming, and you kind of forget about all of the rest of your worries. Again, just a similar shot, but converted to black and white. So I don't often think in black and white, and I normally make the use of all the colours that are around. But every now and then, I might convert something in Lightroom and think, oh, actually, that really makes it stand out. So the black and white can really work just for the details, and to add a bit of atmosphere to this one as well. So quite often, when I am at the shoreline, I'm on my tripod. And this was taken at Sandbanks. And this was a lovely evening, and the sun had set, and it just filled the sky with this amazing pink colour. So I think over the years I've learned that sunrise and sunset doesn't literally mean heading out at sunrise or sunset. You need to be there half an hour or 45 minutes before, and you need to be there the same after. which can turn it into a very, very early or late session, but I think that's super important. You don't want to be walking away and then you see this amazing colour flood the sky. So I've got a few examples of exposure times just to give you an idea of what I'd look for. So this particular shot, this was taken over half a second. Now for me, half a second or a second, depending on how quickly the water's moving, can be enough to give you a nice amount of movement. And I think that's something I love about photography, is it's just your creative license to do whatever you want to do with it. There's no right or wrong. And then looking at this one of Swanage, this was taken back in January, and when sunrise is much more reasonable, of course, it's 8 AM, so we can all do a January sunrise. And this was taken over about 20-second exposure time. And the reason I went for a bit of a longer exposure is because I really wanted to soften that water and give it more of a dreamy feel. So depending on how you want to show your image is the kind of I'll consider what approach I want to take. So I've got a handful to show you from out in the water. So it does look quite grainy up there, but it doesn't look like that on my screen. It's just me focusing in on one ripple of the water. So like I mentioned, I've got my macro lenses that I take out in my underwater housing. And my aim is to try and focus as close as I can on the water movement. And this is at sunrise, so you can see there's this amazing colour that's coming through. But I will also underexpose the image, just because if the sun's going to come up, obviously it's going to be really, really bright, and it's going to potentially blow out the background, and also where it's picking up that little bit of colour on the water as well. So yeah, shooting in the water, my top tips and my considerations are always underexposing. Try and act quite quickly because the water's moving all the time, and just focus up close, and maybe even put your camera in burst mode so you can just fire off a few shots and there's going to be something that's worth keeping there. So I love capturing the sun just as it's coming up over the horizon. And in the sea, obviously you can position yourself as low as you want, that actually you can change the perspective of where the sun's coming up. So if I can see the sun's about to come up, I'll lower myself and get my lens as low as I can, just to focus in on the water again that's closest to me, but be able to see that the sun's rising out in the horizon. And just all the details that come through. So like this particular image, you've got all the ripples within the ripple, which I found really, really fascinating. I love swimming in the sea, and like I say, being from Bournemouth, I'd always be in the water. So to take my camera in the water with me and pick up on all these details are the things that we don't naturally see with our eyes, because it's all happening so quickly around us, and it's those smaller details that sometimes go amiss. But in my photography, that's what I'm trying to look for. I'm trying to look for those hidden details and show them to everyone else as well. So again, just another shot of the sun coming up over the horizon. And I've got low enough here that you can see I'm submerged in the water. So that's what I try and do with my underwater photography. I try and get as close to the water level that I possibly can. Yeah, just try and represent something in quite a abstract way, I guess. So by going out and doing this, it opened up a whole new world of abstract photography for me. And obviously, the sun aside, the sun is, I guess, part of the subject in this image. But to head out in the water without having your subject on the third, or, you know, kind of thinking about all the rules that are instilled in us, and actually looking for those smaller details that are within. So once we'd left Bournemouth, headed over to Brighton, really wanted to check out the Murmuration. And I met up with another photographer who goes there quite often, and he said to me it was one of the poorest years and the poorest days because the wind was really heavy, and yeah, there wasn't that many birds around, but I still had a great time, and I stood on the pier and we fired off lots of shots as we watched all the starlings come in and land under the pier, and it got very, very rowdy listening to them all under there if anyone's been and seen this. So that sunset was quite nice, a nice bit of colour that came across the cloud and made the water look a really lovely colour as well. So I also headed out in the morning just to play around with exposure times at the old pier. And as you can see, from what I've said before, you know, a second, 2 seconds, just playing with those shutter speeds. If you're on the shoreline, on your tripod, you know you're all set up and you can fire off some shots. So I normally put it on timer, just to allow myself a couple of seconds and prevent any camera shake from me hitting the shutter. So yeah, the sun's coming up just to the left of me here, just to the left of the image, and casting that amazing light that's really being picked up in the whites of the water. That particular morning, it wasn't a great sunrise, but like I say, I'll go out well before sunrise so I can photograph the whole experience from the sunrise to the light just after. And for me, that particular morning, this was probably my favourite shot. Just using that water as it picked up, using the light as it picked up over the water. So we actually spent some time in Somerset, which really surprised me that I didn't expect to spend so long in Somerset, if I'm honest. It wasn't my plan when we set out, but we spent a lot of time there. And this particular place is called Burrow Mump. It's a National Trust place, and it's an amazing location where it's just this old ruined church sat up on a hill. And because of the nature of the land, there's lots of water around there, so if it's prone to fog, you know you're going to get a good one. So this particular morning, headed up the hill early for sunrise. Didn't really see the sunrise because the fog was so thick, but I managed to get these pictures, and I just love the atmosphere that it created. Really haunting feel to it. So this is probably one of my favourite sunsets of the trip so far, and this was at Clevedon Marine Lake. And I didn't really expect to be spending much time at Clevedon, never really been there before. Park up in the van, so we stayed a few days. And I remember this particular evening, weird guy, there was a little bit of orange, a little bit of pink, so I was like, oh, I'll keep my eye on that. And then within 10 minutes, I could just see it all getting brighter. I was like, we've got to go, quickly grab my bag, run to the lake. And I tell you, this sunset lasted probably about an hour, because not only, as you can see from this bright patch, the sun is just setting there, but this colour just dragging through the sky. And again, I've gone for a really long exposure time. I think this one was about a minute. And the reason I've gone for so long is because I really wanted to flatten that water, because it's all picking up that amazing colour as well. Composition-wise, I wanted the edge of the concrete to come out the corner of the image, and then you've got these steps that are leading you down into the water. And I did have a swim in there a couple of times that day, so that was really nice as well. So this is also Clevedon Marine Lake. This was taken the next morning. The sun had just risen. And the reason I wanted to get over there for some more photographs is because it was a very high tide. So I knew that at high tide, the water would completely come over the edge, and we'd probably get lots of nice movement, lots of nice patterns from the water. So I headed over there and I took a series of shots, and these were probably around about 2-second shutter speed. So as the waves crashing in, I hit the shutter, and it creates all that lovely movement from the white water moving around. And another surprise to me in Somerset was Portishead. I'd never been to Portishead before, and it has 2 amazing lighthouses. So one of them's in here. And this lighthouse is absolutely incredible, just because I think it's so strange looking. I love a lighthouse. I just think they're fascinating, especially because I just love the coast in general, but you can get some really interesting lighthouses. So I converted this one to black and white, just because it was a sunrise, there wasn't really much colour in the sky, and I thought all that detail in the rock, by changing it to black and white, you can really, really accentuate that, and it draws you in much more than the colour version, which for me was quite a flat, dull image because sunrise wasn't very exciting. So black and white can sometimes be a saving grace. So moving on, we went to Wales. I have to say, there is a lot of this journey that I have had to skip in order to fit all of this in. So there are a lot of images that aren't in here. But yeah, so I've got this small section from Wales. This was during a trip to Snowdonia. And we visited this old quarry. And again, I seem to get really lucky with these eerie, foggy conditions. And for a lot of people, they might not want to head out in that, or might not go for a walk in that. But as soon as I see that out the window, I'm grabbing my camera bag and I'm gone. So I love the way that these broken slate this broken slate wall kind of leads your eye through to the building there and the trees beyond. And I love how fog just gives you that really diffuse look. So it doesn't really matter what depth of field you're shooting with, because you know that everything kind of past, you know, a row of that wall is just going to be completely out of focus and lost in the fog anyway. So those kind of conditions are great to shoot in, and it makes it easy as well. You don't have to be on your tripod. You can shoot quite quickly, handheld, while you're moving around and exploring. So I love this image of this old barn. And there's a bit of a pathway that kind of takes you from the bottom left of the image, that takes you through. And just all the colour tones and the conditions, I thought it was typical bleak Welsh weather at the time. And we were visiting for about a week, and I think most days were either just raining or foggy. But it made it really, really interesting. And again, this is the same location, but just a different pocket of it. I was just looking for different perspectives and different compositions, and this clump of trees really jumped out to me. And I love how the mountains behind are kind of just lost in the fog. So quite often that can be quite hard to balance, because fog or mist can be quite overpowering and quite white and blow out your image. But I think sometimes you don't have to worry too much about the technical aspects. As long as you can see what's there, I think that's what's most important. So now I've got a section where we headed up to Scotland. So Scotland was meant to be a very big trip. We had lots of exciting plans. And it was when the Fujifilm X-T5 was about to be launched. So I had a kind of pre-production model, and the idea was go around Scotland, get some amazing landscapes with it, try, test it, get a feel for the camera and see how I felt about it. But also the content was then used for the launch in Tokyo, which was absolutely amazing. So it was very exciting. I remember going to meet up with Fujifilm before we went up to Scotland, went and grabbed the X-T5 and headed off on our journey, and got some amazing pictures. So this whole little set here from Scotland was taken on the X-T5. So this was taken at one of the waterfalls just as you're heading up the west coast. Really easy stop off, just off the A road. Nice little car park, easy to access. It was a great first test as we crossed the border. So this was taken late afternoon. There was quite a moody sky, but a nice amount of light coming through. And I find those conditions really interesting to play around with, because you've got light and dark, and essentially, you know, that's kind of what photography is. We're trying to balance all of those things together. So this was taken with a polarizer. Quite often I'll use a polarizer on the water to take any glare off or to really accentuate any colours. And again, quite often I might underexpose just very slightly, because we don't want any of the lighter areas to be blown. So then we headed up the west coast into Glencoe. Now this particular spot, well, actually the whole of Scotland in the van was so much easier than England. There's so much more option in Scotland, and we met a lot of other people doing a similar thing, a lot of like-minded people we stopped to chat with along the way, which was really nice. So this particular location, we stayed there for a few days and just waited for the right light to get the kind of image that I wanted. So this was taken around sunrise. The sun's rising just off behind the mountain there. And just as it peeked around, it cast this really nice line of light all the way across the mountain. Generally, that's what I'm looking for. I'm chasing those pockets of light and just exposed for the light patches, again, letting anything else drop off. And the great thing about the X-T5 and most cameras now is the dynamic range of that. You are retaining all of that detail, and you can see so much in the light and dark areas. So even if I'm underexposing, I can generally, as long as it's a raw file, I can generally bring that back. So yeah, this particular morning was just mind-blowing. I remember being stood there with the camera, just smile on my face, just firing off lots of shots. And quite a few of these, actually, I just shot handheld. And I really wanted to try out the IBIS, really pushed that, because, to be honest with you, I'm not very steady, so I feel like anything below 1/80th of a second, I can't really shoot handheld. So I really wanted to push this to its limits. So I think this was taken over a 1/30th of a second. Nice and sharp. And I've gone for to get those reflections in as well. So it worked out quite nice. And of course I had to get my dog to pose too. So there's Buster. So it was great having him as a model actually, so I can try out all these new bits of equipment as well, and he's very obliging. And he absolutely loves like the van life trips because he gets to go to new locations all the time, lots of new smells, lots of new exciting places. So yeah, getting to use him as a model in Glencoe was perfect. Now anyone who's travelled around Glencoe, you know, along that road, just you could stop in every lay-by and there's something amazing to photograph. It's just so easy. So the weather was absolutely horrendous. So once we'd got past that amazing sunrise, that was it. Just the rest of the weather was terrible. So this particular shot, I've shot handheld and managed to get some movement, but some clarity. Now this blew my mind. And I did not expect to be able to do that handheld. It was literally probably like less than half a second. But it was enough to get some movement in the water. The water's moving towards me really, really quickly here, so it didn't take much effort to get some movement. But it was absolutely chucking it down with rain. The moment I left the van door, I thought I had a good moment in between rain showers, but I didn't. As soon as I stepped out, the heavens opened. And I ended up getting back to the van, absolutely soaked through, but super excited because I got a good shot. But the only thing is, of course, in the rain, you need to have that lens cloth on you constantly. So in between every shot, I'm quickly wiping it, quick, take another one, quickly wiping it, take another one. So yeah, luckily I managed to get some decent shots from that moment. But that's the thing about Scotland, isn't it? The weather can be brutal but beautiful all at once. So yeah, that was absolutely amazing. And like I touched on with picking up pockets of light, this particular shot was, it was very, very, very moody afternoon. The sun was getting lower. Didn't think there was much chance of a sunset, but actually just looking around you at all the mountainscapes, there is going to be different pockets of light that's picked up in different places. So I get really obsessive with trying to find those pockets of light. So here I've just taken a shot and exposed for that light line that's come through on the mountain. And that was what made it for me. I think without that line of light, it would have been quite a flat, dull, probably boring image, nothing exciting about it, but light can really, really change that. So this was taken at Fort William. So obviously it was raining. You can see there's a rainbow. It was raining a lot and we were parked up and I saw this rainbow appearing. So I quickly grabbed my camera, legged it out of the van to the edge of the harbour to get this shot. Just took a few handheld images just to see what would work best afterwards. And after that, that's where our Scotland adventure ended because we ended up driving all the way to Skye and a massive storm hit. And so you saw my van, it's old, it's 30 years old. It's got a big skylight in the roof. It's very brittle, very old brittle plastic. And the storm was so strong, we came down off this hill and I could see the rain was going upwards, so I knew the wind was about to hit us. And it caught the front of the skylight, even though it was closed, somehow the wind got in and it was ripping it up, which seemed impossible because it's got metal structures holding it down. So the skylight's being ripped up. And all we can do is just head downhill. And we knew at the end of this hill there was a campsite. And we thought, we'll just get there, see whether anyone can help us. I don't know how. we just needed to get to some kind of civilization. But as we were driving, I actually stopped because I wasn't sure what to do. And this other camper drove past. And it was a really lovely German couple, and they just leant out the window and said, "Can we help?" And I was like, "I don't know, there's nothing we can do, this is happening." And they said, "We'll follow you all the way to the campsite just to make sure you're safe and that you get there okay." And just having them there just made me feel so much better, and I think it's the kindness of strangers in those horrible situations just make you feel a bit better. So they followed us to the campsite. even the campsite were obviously concerned, and they've probably seen a lot. So they went out and got this massive rope, threw it over the van to tie the whole of our van just to hold the skylight down. It was that bad. So we stayed the night tucked behind their reception area, which seemed to be more sheltered from the wind, tied with this rope around us. And they said to us, there's another storm coming in a couple of days. You've probably got a break of an afternoon just to leave the island. So Sky got caught short. And we had then planned on doing the north coast, but it was the worst position for where this storm was coming in from. So we ended up heading back down through Scotland, spent some time near Loch Ness and the Cairngorms, and then headed back down into England. So our whole adventure was caught massively short. We were going to do Skye, we were going to do all the north coast. I mean, it leaves it more adventure for another day, and at the time that story was horrendous, but now I can look back and feel like what a sense of adventure that gives you. So yeah, we had to order another skylight because it had ripped off a few corners. And yeah, we had that replaced once we got back down south. But yeah, it was a bit scary. So that was all the adventures, but I just wanted to show you, like I mentioned earlier, just kind of how I navigate my way through doing all this adventure, but also having some commercial work that pays for the fuel and the food. So I've got a few commercial connections now that I've made that I've built up with some brands over time. So there's only about 3 clients here that I just wanted to show you. So this is Voited. They make recycled blankets, slippers, all kind of interesting things that go really well with camping. So we got in touch with each other during lockdown, and at that time I hadn't really done any commercial work, so I started doing the odd bit of work for free because I wanted to build my portfolio, and I wanted to be in a position that I could then pitch myself to brands and say, here I am, I'm out in nature, this is where I am, and this is where I'd love to photograph your product. So since that, Voited have been back in touch, and I've probably had 4 or 5 contracts with them for different projects now. So a few of these small things that I did some free work for, I think was the way forward for me, because it got to prove my worth, and now these brands are coming back to me for proper paid work, which is amazing. So yeah, we've done some work with them on slippers too. So these slippers are great for camping, so they go with the whole van life vibe. So they were very excited to be able to work with us and our van, so that was an honour for me. I've worked with Animal quite a lot. So they're a beach brand, and they've been around since I was a small child. So you see here, I'm in these pictures. So obviously traveling, it's me and my wife. So sometimes we mix it up and one of us will photograph the other one. As long as we can get good shots with these brands, then that's what we do. So sometimes if I'm in an area where I know other people or models and I can get them involved, I do. But if we're traveling around the UK, it's just us. So we just have to make do. So this is where I've used my wife as a model as well, which she wasn't very keen on at first, but I think she did a great job. So yeah, it was just all about bringing these like sustainable, recycled clothing out in nature and connecting with their values, similar to my values and how I love being near the ocean. So all of these kind of projects kind of work together. Fieldgrounds is another brand that I've done a lot of work for now. So again, just taking these out in nature, because these are barefoot shoes, so the idea is it's better for us walking around barefoot, it's better for your feet, so they're just made in a different way. So it's been really exciting. We did a trip to Turkey, not in the van, not yet. We flew to Turkey to meet up with a friend for a few weeks, and it meant that I could pitch my ideas to a few brands and say, we're going to Turkey, I'm going to do this and this, and I'd love to photograph your brands there. So Fieldgrounds were excited at the idea of the project and got involved. So we did these sandals out in Turkey, in Kaş, which is like the south coast, which is such a beautiful location. It took a few buses to get to from the airport, so there wasn't really any tourists there, so it was really, really nice. So it's amazing to be able to have these opportunities that kind of pay my way, which is exactly, where I want to be with my work. And again, just another project for Fieldgrounds when we're in Scotland. Just making the most of showing that these walking boots are waterproof. So obviously you can see from the details there. But yeah, again, just bringing all these brands together and doing something that I love. Ocean bottles, this is taking recycled plastic from the ocean and creating something out of that. And again, that really resonates with me. I think being in the ocean all the time, they recognised that connection, and we did one small sample piece of work. Again, this was shot in Turkey too. Once we'd done one small project, they said, yeah, we can see you're at the ocean all the time. We really love your values, and we'd like to work with you some more. So since then, we've got a contract where I do 2 or 3 jobs a month, which is absolutely amazing. And what's good about being in the van is that I love being by the coast. So wherever we travel, we're by the coast. So we can always be in a different location, which makes it really interesting for photographs too in this nature. And finally, as a different model, actually. This is one of my surfer friends in Bournemouth, and she's always very obliging to get involved, which is great. And again, just shooting the bottle out by the sea, which is really important to the brand and to me as well. So that's all the commercial work. So I've done a few other bits here and there. Like I say, I do a few weddings, but it's not really majorly my thing. I do events, so we do a lot of festivals over the summer. So I'll go and offer my services. And generally those kind of events, they're quite low-key, smaller festivals. So it'll be in exchange for free tickets and food and, you know, things like that along the way. So I'm just kind of navigating that lifestyle of not everything has to be a massive paid job, but kind of navigating an adventure and earning some money at the same time. And yeah, so that's been the past year, and it's been quite exciting. And that brings us to the end. So, like I say, there's a lot of the adventure that I've missed out massively just because there's not enough time to fit it all in. But if you wanted to have a look at my website, or you can check out my Instagram and have a look at what we've been up to over the last few months. But if anyone has any questions at all, please feel free to ask. Or if not, I'll be over at the Fujifilm stand for the rest of the day. So if anybody wants to come and chat afterwards, then please do let me know. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening, and I hope it's all been all right and not too boring. Thank you.